I hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Good morning, Leo Antell out there across the pond. I don't know what episode this is, but we're going back on track with it. The wide world of boxing, it changes so rapidly. I think the first thing I want to talk about is going to be Oscar Valdez and Shakur Stevenson. Specifically, they're both finally signing the contract and making this fight official for April 30th. So, immediately, what's your knee-jerk reaction to that, and how do you feel about the possibility of that fight being on the same night as the Amanda Serrano-Katie Taylor fight? Leo?
Do you know what? I think it was bad decision-making on Top Rank's behalf by putting it on the same night, because both are huge main card events. I don't know. I think look, Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez, I can't believe it's happening at the perfect time. Both arguably nearing their prime. I mean, that's a huge fight. I didn't think we'd see the day anytime soon. I thought that Oscar Valdez might fight Emmanuel Navarrete or rematch Conceição. I wasn't really sure. So the fact that this fight's happening now, I'm gassed for it. It's a great fight.
Let me it's parallel in the same kind of subject line. What did you think about Bob Arum's comments of saying that nobody watches women's boxing? Now, you're there across the pond. Is it different out there for some of the women boxing stars, or is it pretty much the same here where people are very dismissive of it as they are in the States?
I don't think there's any universal thought on women's boxing. I think everyone has their own opinion, unfortunately. We've still got those people who are quite backward about it, not very progressive, don't think it's as good. But I'll tell you what, I've seen some of Katie Taylor's fights on Sky Sports undercards, and she's fought better than the main card event. So I think it's stupid. She had a really exciting fight with Natasha Jonas. She's always in great fights. I think women's fights are super exciting. So it's a shame to see a promoter like Bob Arum say that. But, you know, he is 90. So he's
living in a whole different reality. It's very unusual. Do you think that the Valdez Stevenson fight coinciding on the same night, who do you think will get more viewers? The Valdez fight, the Shakur Valdez fight, or the Serrano Taylor fight? Who do you think gets more viewers?
It's a difficult one because they're not both pay-per-view events. One's just a DAZN subscription fight, and one is a pay-per-view event. So if they were both pay-per-view, I'd obviously go Shakur Stevenson and Valdez would get more views. But because this is just a free DAZN fight.
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to be on ESPN Plus. I didn't know it was a pay-per-view thing.
Is Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez ESPN Plus, or?
I think it's ESPN Plus with Top Rank cards. Most of the time, those kind of fights are usually ESPN Plus or ESPN, and ESPN Plus is roughly like a streaming service, kind of, or an additive to your basic cables program.
Right, but if you don't have ESPN Plus, and you're watching it here in the UK, you'll have to pay for it. No. I
don't know what the difference is over there, to be honest.
Okay, well, let's not get into the too specifics of that. So I think the Valdez Stevenson fight gets more views, personally.
Okay, so I believe that the Amanda Serrano-Katie Taylor fight would get more views just on the history of it alone. And I don't know if we'd ever see a situation like that where you have a mainstream male fight and a mainstream men's fight and a mainstream women's fight coincide in the same night. But especially just for the historic nature of that fight, ideally, I think in our minds we think it's going to break the glass ceiling or what have you. But back to this Shakur Stevenson and Oscar Valdez thing. So they both have finally signed the contract, and there was a lot of back and forth between who signed the contract, people ducking, you know, the typical kind of banter back and forth between camps. Why do you think Shakur Stevenson made it a point to pitch a narrative that Oscar Valdez was avoiding signing the contract or ducking him when neither had signed the contract to begin with?
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised when I heard that Shakur Stevenson also hadn't signed his side of the contract, because I was under the impression that he had signed and we were all just waiting on Oscar Valdez. But they signed at the same time. I think, you know, It definitely gave the fight some hype. And if I'm honest, I think Shakur Stevenson goes into this fight more confidently than Oscar Valdez does because he's coming off a much better win.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That kind of thing is.
I was very confused by it all myself. I was like, why?
Yeah.
What was the point? But I guess it made for fun internet fodder because people were making all kinds of memes about it, and then in the end, you found that. And you know, these are all chess games. These are all parts of the pieces moving. I'm sure they're both trying to outdo each other on the chessboard. So I'm sure there's a bit of maneuvering as far as trying to play psychological games with each other on who signed first and who didn't. And that's fascinating. Anything to get a mental edge, I guess, in this thing. But how do you see, in your mind, Oscar Valdez and Shakur playing out?
Well, I've always said since this fight even came to the fans' eyesight, since this before this came to fruition, I really do think Shakur Stevenson will school him. I think Shakur Stevenson has all the tools to beat him. However, I do not think that Oscar Valdez will make it an easy night. I think that Oscar Valdez does have facets to his game that could, trouble Shakur at times. But after seeing that Jamel Herring fight, I don't know what he could do to beat Shakur Stevenson. That is Oscar Valdez, obviously. I can't see how he wins that fight. I don't think he'd knock him out. I think Shakur's too sharp defensively. What has he got, do you think, that could possibly trouble Shakur Stevenson?
For Oscar Valdez, and the reason why I would side with him is because I've just seen him pull a lot of miracles out of his hat over the years following his career. Especially like when he got his jaw broke with Scott Quigg. That would let me know that he's clearly not one to lie down easily. So he's going to make it a fight regardless. I've seen him in positions where he's the severe underdog, like he was against Miguel Berchelt. And Shakur Stevenson is an entirely different animal. So I think it's a matter of who can enforce their will the toughest. Now, of course, Shakur Stevenson has looked fabulous up until this stage in his career, and that's undeniable. But there's always that small chance that Oscar Valdez will be able to enforce his game plan on him, pressure him, suffocate his space, and pull off what I think boxing people would consider an underdog victory. Again, I think the Vegas odds are roughly have them at about the same, oddly enough. But I don't know. I've seen in the past, like Marco Antonio Barrera fought Kenny McKinney, who was a former Olympian. He had the fast twitch movement, real good boxing style. You've got Barrera against Prince Nassim. You got Morales against Junior Jones. There's examples. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. against Meldrick Taylor, where it just seemed like stylistically you've got what you roughly would consider a plotter / heavy-handed guy against a guy that moves around a lot and stays behind his jab. And there is a method to it. If everything aligns perfectly, I think we could see another upset on Valdez's part. But make no mistake about it, Shakur Stevenson is undeniable as far as his pure sheer ring IQ and skill set. Oscar Valdez has a tall task in front of him. It's whoo.
Here's where I say that argument is very flawed. In that you're talking about Marco Antonio Barrera and Julio Cesar Chavez, who are pressure fighters. Oscar Valdez is not a pressure fighter. In fact, he's quite far from it. He showed that he's a bit of a one-trick pony. He's got that overhand right and a big left hook, and he doesn't throw that much. He's got a low work rate, similar to Canelo, because he trains with that Eddie Reynoso in the Eddie Reynoso camp. So I don't think he has a pressure fighting style. So they're not really comparable. The way that Marco Antonio Barrera took out Prince Nassim, who was a great mover, was that he had that old school quality technique and he was always coming forward and broke him down. I don't think Oscar Valdez has that in his arsenal. In fact, I think
has Shakur ever fought anybody with remotely the kind of power and the pedigree like Oscar Valdez has? We've never actually seen him in there with anybody like Oscar either.
We definitely haven't. But at the end of the day, you've also compared him to Valdez's victory over Scott Quigg, who's, in my opinion, a domestic level fighter. He's not a world level fighter for one. And look what Jamel Herring did to Carl Frampton, and then what Shakur Stevenson did to Jamel Herring.
Okay.
You see where I'm coming from? I just think Shakur has showed he is levels above the domestic fighters in the UK, for example. and levels above the domestic US fighters. So, again, Valdez hasn't really had his fair share of high-level opposition. I think they're in similar positions, but I think Shakur is a much more talented boxer with more to his game. He's going to break him down, and if anything, he's more of a pressure fighter than Oscar Valdez is.
You might have a point about that. He has. I know in that last fight with Jamel Herring, he was definitely staying in front of his face, and I would like to see. It's going to be an interesting fight, that's for sure. But I don't see a wash like everyone thinks, but I could be wrong.
So you do think that Stevenson is going to win?
Do I?
Yeah. Do you think that Stevenson will win?
I don't. I think Oscar's going to pull off another one of those crazy upsets and shock everybody.
How?
I do. I think he's just going to gut it out and make it an ugly fight for Shakur in something that he's never really experienced before and get a crazy split decision win. That's what I think. And I think maybe he might even get a knockdown. And I'm being very optimistic on this one. Very optimistic on this one.
Do you really believe that? I don't see how... What type of scenario is this? How does he get that shot? Obviously, you're not a fortune teller, but I just don't see how it happens. Shakur Stevenson's defense is second to none. He gets caught with very little. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say that he's going to... He hasn't even taken a shot, a real big shot. He hasn't even been caught flush in his career yet. So I'm finding it hard to see.
I think this fight will be the fight where he finally gets caught flush and we see what he's made of. I don't believe he's going to go through this unscathed at all. And I believe at the very least, Oscar Valdez does have enough skill set to make it very, very difficult for Shakur. And I think he's going to catch him clean. And I think it's idealistic to assume that he's just not going to get touched at all. Like, I'm not really sure how he pulled it off against Jamel Herring, but I thought Jamel Herring had the wrong game plan. He should have gone in there and made it a dogfight as opposed to try to outbox a guy that's already a great boxer. So if Oscar decides to not try to go the boxing route, I think he stands a good chance. And I think people are underestimating his pedigree. I think the Conceição fight was a terrible fight for Oscar. Clearly, he was in a whole different space mentally, but I think he could have fought that fight a lot more intelligently. Clearly, he was going through a whole lot of drama outside in the build-up to that fight, but I guess we'll find out on that night. But I'm Team Valdez on this one. I'm gonna ride till the wheels fall off.
You're entitled to that, but I definitely think it's more idealistic to think he's gonna pull out a miraculous shot the way he did against.
Oh, I know it's idealistic. Oh, I know it's idealistic to think that.
But you said it was idealistic to think that Shakur it would be easy for him to outbox Valdez. In the same way that he did Herring.
No, I don't, easily and get untouched. A lot of people, like I seen somebody say something to the effect of, it's going to be a second round TKO. I'm like, you are tripping. It is not going to be a second round TKO or a walk in the park. And I don't see, clearly, obviously, I'm not seeing Shakur knocking him out because I don't really see Shakur knocking too many people out. But
I'm not sure about that.
You think Shakur gets the stoppage?
I think Shakur knows that he has to take risks in this fight and really show what he's made of. That's what I'll say.
And I think that if he takes risks,
high-profile fight.
That's when he'll get caught. If he takes risks, he'll get caught. I think him playing that conservative, staying on the back foot role worked with certain fights before this, but I think in this one he's going to have to take risks. Unless he wants to get labeled as that guy that's just kind of not the most, for casual boxing fans, entertaining to watch. Because casual boxing fans, they want to see that. They want to see that stuff. Like what we saw with Jamel Herring, we really haven't seen too much of that from Shakur.
Here's what I'll say on the last note with that fight. I think that Shakur will break him down to the body. He'll throw that signature double straight where he holds this palm out to your face. He'll cover Valdez's face. He'll open his body up, leave him exposed. He'll go to the body. And I think he'll just eventually break him down and outpoint him. I think it's more likely he gets a unanimous decision than a late stoppage, but I can see both outcomes.
Valdez, split decision. I'm going to eat major crow for this one, probably, but it's all right. I'm rolling with it. I was picking Valdez to win against Burchelt, and everybody was, not a chance he beats Burchelt. No way, because Burchelt was mowing everyone down. And he pulls off another. I love the underdog story on this one. It's a possibility.
Fair enough. All right, moving on.
Okay. What was the other one we were going to discuss? Hold on, let me see. I had the notes right here in front of me. Oh, Daniel Jacobs and Ryder.
Oh, okay.
I
So,
wanted.
did you watch the highlights or the full fight in the end, or have you not had the chance yet?
I did watch the full fight all the way through. It was
Okay.
kind of a snoozer, to be honest. I was not impressed with
Yeah.
either person. It was a a touch and go affair. Let's grab and hold and ruin each other's momentum instead of letting each other let the foot off the gas. But I'll say this about that Ryder Jacobs fight. Danny Jacobs in his last few fights has fought very uninspired, and I felt like he was very uninspired in this fight too. It's frustrating when you see somebody who's shown like glimpses of, when he fought Triple G, when he fought Canelo, it was a different Danny Jacobs fighting at 160, going up to 168, and even especially in that last fight with Gabe Rosado, it just looked like Danny Jacobs is really indifferent to all of it. It almost looked like he's just happy to collect a check, like he's over it.
Yeah, I agree. He didn't look like he was there that night. It got to round 7 and he looked dazed, but he hadn't really been caught with anything. I just don't think he was mentally there for that fight. It was a lot of touch and go, grab, like you said, a lot of clinching. For the first 6 rounds, he was definitely dominating, but dominating in a very boring fashion. Nothing really happened. Nothing notable happened. But then when John Ryder took over around the 7th to 8th round, maybe, I think he was much more entertaining, and you kind of thought he might have rocked Jacobs. But yeah, I think it should have been a draw or a split decision for Daniel Jacobs. I still think he did enough to win that fight. But the narrative was, that Matchroom DAZN, it was a fixed fight. I don't think it was fixed.
No, I don't agree with that narrative.
I just don't think any of that, and it came from also the Felix Cash fight, because he got a win after being knocked down twice, and then also with a 10-7 round, but he also dominated the majority of the rounds. I think that fight with Magiev should have been a draw. He was a Russian fighter who came over for the WBC international title. That fight, in my opinion, should have been a draw. But yeah, look.
I thought the loss was a fair decision. I thought if you're going to go into a foreign country and fight one of the dudes out there from that country, you need to win it decisively. And Danny Jacobs did not win it decisively. And CompuBox strong. And you don't want to use CompuBox as a metric for establishing why you believe a decision is. You should watch the fight the whole way through, because CompuBox doesn't tell the whole story. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Ryder outthrew him in that fight. Just a little bit. But either way, if you're not going to go into somebody else's house and make it an obvious one-sided domination, then you don't want to go into somebody else's house. And Danny Jacobs did not make it look like a one-sided affair. It was very competitive both sides. So I think when it comes down to a close decision in a matter like that, it was going to go to Ryder. And I don't think it's a matter of being fixed at all. I love how our audience out here in the USA, we're always quick to scream fix, but we do the same thing to foreign fighters when they come out here. If you don't win decisively, you're going to get janked in the judging.
Yeah, spot on. I agree. To be honest, there's not even much to say on those fights because they were actually quite. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. They weren't particularly exciting, and I don't think there would be a rematch between Jacobs and Ryder because it just wasn't entertaining enough. I don't know where Ryder goes from here. He wanted his world title shot, but who does he fight? Does he fight someone like Rosado? Does Jacobs even fight again? There are so many questions to get from that fight. I mean, Ryder sort of calling out Canelo. There are levels to the game.
Well, the Canelo and Ryder fight, that's not even that's not going to happen.
That's never going to materialize.
Do you think that Danny Jacobs should hang up the gloves and call it a career? He's made millions. I don't see him getting a title at 168.
I think he's not with it in the same way that he used to be. I mean, he gave Triple G a run for his money. And Triple G is arguably one of the best middleweights of all time. So, I think it would be. He's had a great career. He came back from cancer. I mean, he's the miracle man. He's done so much for himself mentally and for the sport of boxing, and he was such an inspiration to so many people. So I think he's had a great career, and it's good to if you're losing to John Ryder. I'm not saying John Ryder isn't a formidable, great opponent, But Daniel Jacobs was levels above, and he was meant to display that, but he didn't. So I think it's definitely about time he hangs up the gloves, or has one last fight. But yeah, he's definitely past the sell-by date.
You got no disagreements with me on that one. Unfortunately, I love Danny Jacobs, but I think it's time. At 35 years old, he's made millions. Hang it up and walk away with your head held high.
I think what John Ryder needs to do is have a rematch with Callum Smith. The problem is that Callum Smith has moved up to light heavyweight, made his debut, looked really good, but where's Callum Smith go at light heavyweight? There's not really any options for him because you've now got Artur Beterbiev fighting Joe Smith Jr. The winner will either get Anthony Yarde or the winner of Canelo versus Bivol when that happens.
Let's go switch into that one. So the announcement got made. Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr. I think it's they're targeting June. I think the end of June, if I'm not mistaken. It looks like it might be Madison Square Garden. Yeah. How do you feel about Artur Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr.?
Great fight. The reason I think it's so interesting is because Artur Beterbiev looked a bit over the hill against Marcus Brown. He got that 9th round TKO, or was it a KO?
It was, I think it was a stoppage.
Stoppage, yeah.
I think it was a TKO.
He knocked
him
down.
TKO.
Yeah, he knocked him down, and he also got that TKO stoppage. So I think it's really interesting. He looked okay in that fight, but he definitely showed that he had slowed down a bit. He's still got the power, but Joe Smith Jr., on the other hand, 32 years old compared to Beterbiev, who's 37, he looks like he's going into his prime. And whoever they've put in front of him, he's knocked them out. He's looked really good. I think, in their primes, Beterbiev is a better fighter. But due to the timescale and the time frame that this is happening, I think Joe Smith Jr. has a much greater chance of winning than people think. So
it's interesting because I think if this fight were to. I think if this fight were to have happened 3 years ago, everyone would have been utterly 3 or 4 years ago, people would have been totally dismissive of Joe Smith Jr. in this. But I've noticed that there's a slight shift in the mindset that there's quite a few people who see it as a very strong possibility of Joe Smith Jr. pulling this off, and I'm one of them. I'm one of them. When I think about Joe Smith Jr.,
that's your boy. You're rocking with your boy.
There's bias. There's bias there. I like Joe Smith Jr.
No, not even that. Yeah, he's just the boy. He's the boy.
Yeah, I love his whole story. Like it's. Anybody who I think has followed his career, and I've seen him for years, and he was the underdog in so many fights for so many years, and he was knocking everyone out. And it's, for the life of me, I can't figure why American audiences are just now waking up to Joe Smith Jr. Took him long enough, but I've watched him slowly climb. I've seen him get knocked down off the climb, and then get himself readjusted and climb back up the mountain again and get to the top again. So it's going to be an interesting fight, and obviously, I'm going Joe Smith Jr. for the win. I'm thinking he's either going to get the decision or he might full-on stop the monster. He might full-on stop Beterbiev because Beterbiev looked very vulnerable in that last fight. But nonetheless, it is Beterbiev. It is, 17 wins, 17 knockouts, deep amateur pedigree. So it's going to be a fight that the fans win regardless. No matter what, I think that's going to be one of the fights of the year. And
I hope so, but what makes me a little bit undecided is the fact that Joe Smith Jr. didn't fight Callum Johnson for the WBO title. I think that fight would have been a decider in who would win between Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr.
I really wanted to see that fight because Callum Johnson is a bruiser and he has a lot of power in his hands. And
he knocked down Artur Beterbiev.
He did. And Callum Johnson, I know he's really big on his hooks and his wide loopy shots, and Joe Smith Jr. is more a straightforward puncher. He's a straight shot guy.
Yeah.
So it would have been interesting for them to fight. I'm a little okay. So Top Rank went to like 10, 20 dudes in the top rankings of light heavyweights, and they all turned down the last minute offer. All those guys, and I'm sure they pitched the offer to Johnson and Yarde and Smith and all the other litany of guys in the light heavyweights that are ranked. And the only one that took it at the very end was Steve Gerard, like 20 guys down. So unfortunately, it would have been. I think it would have been awesome if Yarde would have taken it on last minute notice. But clearly, they don't stay ready. The light heavyweight division, the rest of the guys didn't stay ready for that moment or that phone call last minute. But,
yeah, you're right. I think so. I think Anthony Yarde is too big. Also, he was coming off that fight with Lyndon Arthur. but he's also too big of a name to sort of just call on 2 weeks' notice. So, yeah, it made sense that they went for Jafar.
It was a horrible one-sided fight. I felt bad for Jafar because he was clearly out of his depth.
Yeah,
but I give kudos to the man for stepping up, because who steps up in like what 2 weeks notice, 1 week notice against Joe Smith Jr.? Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. You know, but I'm leaning towards Joe Smith Jr. to get the win in that, the title unification. Obviously I'm biased to Joe Smith Jr. I like Joe Smith Jr. To me, he's the modern day Rocky, and I don't know why American fans haven't really got behind him like that. Like, we tried to make Chuck Wepner, we tried to make Jerry Quarry, we tried to make Jerry Cooney the Rocky, but it turns out we've got a champion in our hands, and he's been fighting the Russian guys for years, and he's right there from Long Island, New York City. So I like Joe Smith Jr. We got Devin the Dream Haney, George Kambosos. They're having a war of words on Twitter. We've got Lou DiBella, Eddie Hearn both jumping in. Everyone's accusing each other of sending over contracts, not sending over contracts, ducking and avoiding each other. What is your take on this this Devin Haney, George Kambosos mess?
Look, here's why it gets a bit complicated. I think there's a lot of politics going on. Ryan Garcia is fighting Emmanuel Targo. George Kambosos hasn't got an opponent yet. I think what they really want to do is set George Kambosos up with Ryan Garcia. They don't want that Haney fight. They know the size of Ryan Garcia's name and his social media following, and I just think DAZN want that fight, and I saw that Ryan has said that DAZN want to make it the undisputed title. He gets the first shot at Kambosos, and I think he beats Kambosos, but we'll get onto that shortly after. That's highly controversial. But yeah, I think it's a mess because I think Devin Haney just isn't a big enough name. He doesn't bring in the numbers, and I think they are ducking him because I think they know he's high risk. He could very well beat George Kambosos, and Lou DiBella knows that. I think Kambosos will fight anyone. He's a warrior. He thinks he can beat all those guys. But I heard Robert Garcia's conversation with Lou DiBella. He talked about it. He said that the plan is Ryan Garcia, and that's why that fight isn't happening.
Ooh, that is a damn shame for Devin Haney.
It is. You'll move on.
Fight. I think the logical path forward clearly is undisputed. I think anytime you have the opportunity to get undisputed, you should. And when it comes to fight talks dissolving, I place the blame square on both sides. I don't believe you can ever place the blame totally, completely on one side or the other. But, I think if both fighters really sincerely wanted the fight to happen, it would happen. So I'm sure there's some kind of hesitancy both on Kambosos' side and Devin's side. And I don't know if it's a matter of Devin might be asking too much money, or he's just not willing to compromise, or maybe it's all coming from George Kambosos Jr. side. He's like, no, they've already decided there's just way more money in a Ryan Garcia fight. I don't really know. That would leave George Kambosos inactive until third, fourth quarter this year.
Look, here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to call it George Kambosos and Devin Haney because I don't think it's either of them. I don't think they have that much involvement in what's going on. I think what I call it is Eddie Hearn and Lou DiBella and Golden Boy, because I don't think the fighters actually have that much to do with the negotiations. I think this is all about numbers. I think this is clearly a numbers game between the promoters. I think all the fighters, whatever people want to say, I think all the fighters want to fight each other. I think Garcia wants to fight Kambosos. I think Kambosos wants to fight Haney. It all comes down to the same thing. So it is a promoter's problem. And all I'll say on that note is that Haney deserves the shot the most because he's the WBC champion. But it's disputed by the WBC themselves, who say that George Kambosos is undisputed. So he's the undisputed champion. That's why it gets complicated. They need to settle that. That's a fight for boxing fans.
I've never seen Mauricio Suleiman explain it in a way that makes sense. I've seen him be interviewed left, right, up and down on that subject of what's going on with this franchise, who's the undisputed. And every time I see him explain it, I'm like, huh?
He can't.
And
he knows he can't. It's all about sanctioning
I know
fees.
boxing. Yeah, I know boxing. You know boxing. When I see him try to explain, dude, if the WBC president can't explain it, holy crap, dude, we're
Look, we can get into all that jazz, but I'm not even going to get into that because you know what? Suleiman even gave Canelo the franchise belt, had no explanation for it. He's got the diamond belt, the franchise belt, the eternal belt. It's like, there are too many belts. We're not going to get into that.
Okay, hypothetically, somehow, some way, George Kambosos Jr. and Devin do meet up to fight. How would you have seen that playing out, or what would you see inside your head happening in that event?
A lot of people are going to disagree with me, but at the end of the day, look at the facts. Devin Haney's fought Jorge Linares. Everyone doubted him in that fight. He won. He got one. Okay, he had one bad moment in the 9th round. Whatever. He's 22 years old. He fought Jojo Diaz. Schooled him. Took him out with ease throughout the 12 rounds. Devin Haney is a 12-round fighter. He can last. He's so durable. He's such a good boxer. So well schooled. He'll outbox Kambosos for the majority of the fight, and he'll get the unanimous decision. That's just the fighter he is. He's not going to get a cool knockout. He's not going to get anything particularly exciting. He's an in-out, hit-and-miss fighter. Hit and don't get hit fighter. Sorry.
I think he would win by decision against Kambosos. I do believe Kambosos has a chance of catching him because he clearly caught Teofimo, but I think if he didn't catch him with a crazy flash knockdown or knockout, and we still don't have any concrete proof that Devin is a solid, despite what the critics say. I don't believe Devin has a questionable chin because we haven't seen him get knocked out, so we really can't say that. He got rocked by Linares, but I think Haney would win by decision. And
he got rocked by Linares. Sorry, I need to go over this because I can't stand this whole thing about Haney, getting rocked by Linares and it being such a big thing. Lomachenko got knocked down by Linares. Haney didn't even get knocked down. So, I don't think he has a questionable chin. I think that Linares just has a very good straight right hand down the pipe, and he caught him. But Devin Haney showed his, where he stands. He's a champion. He didn't give up. He didn't go to the canvas. No, it barely even fazed him. Okay, he had shaky legs at the end of the round. But then what?
Yeah, I don't agree with the narrative that Devin has a suspect chin. I mean, he did get rocked, but he didn't get dropped, and I think a large part of it has to do with, oddly enough, his presence on social media being relatively large. Not large as Ryan Garcia, but large enough to where whatever he does, he can't do anything correct by his critics, I guess, But I think boxing purists can look at his style and what he's accomplished so far at his young age and his opposition level and say, yeah, Devin is doing his job very, very effectively up until this point. And he might have the best resume out of all the lightweights currently. I think he might actually.
He does. He has a better resume than Kambosos. Kambosos has fought Lee Selby.
Outside of Lomachenko, but...
Lomachenko, I think they go toe-to-toe because, Lomachenko's got a few names on his resume, but he's also got 2 losses. And here's the thing, I think Devin Haney is a better boxer than Teofimo Lopez. I do think fans don't want to admit that Teofimo Lopez had a very bad night. He did. There's no beating around the bush. He came in swinging, off balance. I don't think he was all there that night, and he had the lung problems. I don't want to give excuses. Kambosos won like a champion, and I really like him. But you've got to look at the facts. He's just not fought the same level as opposition as Devin Haney. So,
I don't blame. I don't knock Teofimo Lopez for that night. He lost, and he definitely came in with the wrong game plan. Maybe it was poor planning and poor strategy because I think he thought he was going to blast him out of there in a round or two, and when it didn't happen, and you found out that Kambosos Jr. was a live dog with a solid chin. And he took him the whole distance, and Teofimo Lopez is a whole different storyline as far as what his path forward is going to be. But we got the Ryan Garcia waiting in the wing. That's going to be the one I think that you're leaning towards. We got Ryan Garcia, left Eddie Reynoso. Ryan Garcia has left Eddie Reynoso officially and joined up with Joe Goosen. Do you think that's a smart move for Ryan Garcia?
Very smart move. Got a lot of backlash saying, He doesn't work hard enough for the Reynoso camp. This is the end of him. He's going to lose his fight on April 9th. Complete rubbish. I think it was a great move. One, he's out of Canelo's shadow. As much as people don't want to admit that, he's a huge name, and I think it's better that he has his own gym now in San Diego with a new trainer. Eddie Reynoso is a great trainer, but he's probably much more focused on Valdez and Canelo. You can't be training a camp of superstars. It just doesn't work. Freddie Roach, his main focus was Manny Pacquiao, but he had other fighters in the background, but those fighters generally weren't really high level. He had Amir Khan at times. But yeah, I think the Joe Goosen move is really smart. And Joe Goosen is no joke of a trainer. He's taken on, speaking of Amir Khan, he's taken Amir Khan, Shane Mosley, the brothers, what are their names again?
Oh, Gabriel and Rafael Ruelas.
Exactly. He took on those brothers, built them from scratch, and made them world champions.
Michael Nunn, obviously Chico Corrales.
Yeah, Diego Corrales.
People were quick to throw Ryan Garcia under the bus for this move because I think anytime you knock Canelo and Eddie, how can you leave them? But Eddie has shown, that there is no one-stop fix for any trainer. Like, there's good trainers, there's great trainers, and Eddie's one of them. But that doesn't mean he can make everybody a Canelo. Clearly, Virgil Hunter can't make everybody an Andre Ward. We saw Eddie Reynoso effectively kind of fail in his link up with Luis Nery. Luis Nery didn't take to the Eddie Reynoso system very well. We saw Andy Ruiz Jr. in his first fight under Eddie Reynoso looked very shaky in his fight with Areola, who is essentially by most measurements a shot heavyweight. He's past his prime significantly. And then we saw Oscar Valdez when he was adjusting to Eddie Reynoso a couple of fights before the Burchelt fight. A lot of people were having doubts because he was trying to adjust to that counterpunching style, being more defensively aware. So not everybody adheres to that Reynoso style. And I agree that Ryan made a smart move in deciding that he wants to create his own legacy and define himself outside of the shadow of Canelo, because that is an immense shadow to be under.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think Ryan is not the same build as Canelo. That's a huge factor, right? I think Canelo's style is tuck in, weight. He's generally a lot shorter than his opponent, and he has to basically throw really long hooks and break them down. I think Ryan, funnily enough, has much more of a style that would suit, say, Kronk. We've talked about this. He'd be great with Sugar Hill Stewart because he's not lanky, but he's tall and rangy. So he could fight like Tommy Hearns. You were saying that when you met him, he was pretty tall, and he fights at he fights at lightweight. So I think that style really doesn't suit him. That counter punching, tucked in. I just don't think that's him. I think he should be out here with the jab.
I know Joe Goosen's style and his students very well, and it's such a good mix. Joe Goosen is right up there with, when you said Sugar Hill and Kronk, Joe Goosen is like the more experienced version of Sugar Hill. He isn't quite Kronk school of that 1-2, but the 2 isn't Ryan's bread and butter, it's his hooks. But the one thing I know Joe Goosen does do is he makes your offensive capabilities even more dangerous, and he teaches his fighters how to dog it out in the trenches. Like, Joe Goosen will turn him into a monster if it's within Ryan to be that dude, which I do believe he wants to prove his critics wrong. But Joe Goosen will definitely have Ryan going in there trying to take people's heads off. That much I do know about Joe's style. And he'll give him a good disciplined jab too, because a lot of Joe Goosen fighters fought well behind their jabs.
We're big fans of Ryan Garcia. We like Ryan Garcia. I think he gets way too much stick. I'm bored of that. It's boring. The hate train's boring. It's really easy to criticize a fighter because he's got a big social media following. And, I'm tired of it. I think he deserves his respect. 200 plus amateur fights, fought an Olympic gold medalist, won. Okay, he had a year out the ring. So what? So have so many fighters. Floyd Mayweather had over a year out the ring when he went to prison. Ryan's a good guy. He's sharp.
The amount of feedback I've gotten in just this last week from the couple of videos that I've done on Ryan, it's eye-opening. I'm like, where are these narratives coming from? Nobody knows what happened between him and Eddie. Let's stop. Okay, he had the fights where he was supposed to have, and I don't want to turn this into a pro Ryan Garcia channel clearly, but he had the anxiety thing and he took a break, and I can respect that. And then he legitimately injured his hand. So I'm like, what does everyone expect? He's him to come out of his first fight out of an injury and fight Tank or fight, he's gonna do something that would be more considered a tune-up fight for that busted hand. And I've seen the scar; it's gnarly, and I'm just like, whoa. But the hate is it's interesting. You and I are clearly not on the hate train type riders, which is very interesting. But yeah, I'm curious to see how he develops under Joe Goosen. I think it's a fascinating wrinkle to add to his career and his story. And I do think Devin Haney should get that fight with George. But if it's Ryan, nothing I can do or say about it. Let the fights happen.
Yeah. Look, Ryan has ducked 3 fights. We know this. Linares, Fortuna, and Diaz. There's no denying that. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I really like how his career's played out. I really like him. Look, I've got good things to say about him, but he's definitely no saint. He's definitely ducked those guys, and there's no denying that. But the criticism is way too harsh, because there are other fighters that have done just that. And also, people really do forget his age. Because look at what happened. I was watching a documentary today about Amir Khan's career. Olympic gold medalist, 17 years old, went into the pros at that age, really young, and then they put him in with a big puncher, a big Colombian puncher, right? And look what happened. It was a huge upset on home soil, and he had to completely rebuild his career, and it was just a disaster on the matchmaking side. So I don't think you want to make those mistakes if you're a young fighter, jumping in too soon.
I agree. I don't think you should just be forcing yourself to do anything unnecessarily for the sake of appeasing the bloodlust in fans. And I take into account his age. I'm always taking that into account, because when I was 22, 23, I couldn't imagine having that many people's eyes on me. But yeah, so it looks like as far as what Robert Garcia said on Little Giant Boxing, it's going to be Tego first, and then Ryan Garcia and George Kambosos, in a super fight in Australia?
Big fight. I prefer Haney, but yeah, it is what it is. Haney over Garcia to get Kambosos. I don't think Lomachenko deserves the shot straight away. I think he should fight the winner of Haney versus Kambosos. And I think Haney versus Lomachenko, that's a great fight.
That would be an interesting fight. I could see Haney taking that fight too.
Ooh, hot take.
Haney strikes me as the type to fight anybody. He really has shown that he's down to fight anybody that's down to sign a contract. I mean, he's so far established himself as the most legitimate lightweight.
I think Lomachenko beats Haney, personally. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I think Lomachenko could beat Haney. I would edge towards Lomachenko, but I think Haney has a huge chance there. So, yeah, I think that's a good one.
I don't know who I would lean towards in that one. I'm biased. I'd be like, yeah, Devin can beat Lomachenko, but damn, it's Lomachenko.
All right, Jay, I've got to ask you, before we wrap up, Amir Khan, Kell Brook, what's your prediction?
Oh, man, it's the battle of the glass chin versus the battle of the glass eye sockets.
Oof.
And I've always been partial to Amir Khan. I think he's overall a better boxer. Kell Brook has shown in the past he's more of a stronger, durable guy that likes to get in there and make it a fight. And I think if Amir Khan can impose his reach and his style, I think it's going to be a rough night for Kell Brook. But it's one of those fascinating fights where it really is like a 50-50 fight for the most part.
It's so hard to call.
I think it's weird because I think we were all making fun of it at first, and then when you heard it sold out in like 11 minutes, you're like, oh, this is fascinating. So there's still a large desire to see this fight, and now I'm obviously very interested. I think Amir Khan pulls it off. I think Amir Khan might even get the stoppage. I'm saying a late stoppage of Kell Brook if Amir Khan doesn't get knocked out.
My heart is saying Kell Brook, but my head is saying Amir Khan. Kell Brook, given it was, when it should have been 2015, I actually would have gone with Kell Brook. I think he would have timed him and got a really nice shot in there and stopped him.
In 2015, I think Kell Brook would have manhandled Amir Khan.
Yeah, now they're both, their chins are both endurable. So I lean towards Khan. It's so annoying. I just think Kel has taken so much punishment in recent years that will come back. But again, I'm not ruling out either or. It's a really boring prediction, but I can see both. That's why it's so interesting. Everyone's going to watch it.
That's I think that's what everyone's thinking right now. Is like they're both susceptible to knocking each other out because they've both shown that their punch resistance is mush. So
the thing is, right, British fans were so critical of this fight, saying, "Oh, it should have been made ages ago. You know, this is terrible." But then we all watched The Gloves Are Off yesterday, and we're all fucking gagging for it. It's a great, it was hilarious. It was the best Gloves Are Off ever.
Like that. Why did Kell Brook go out like I need my big brother's approval?
Oh, it was funny as fuck. Honestly, I couldn't stop laughing. You're getting it, you. You're getting it, you. And Amir was like, "Who's the A side? Who's the A side? You." And he was like, "Thank you." Say it again. It was so funny seeing Khan with that aura of like arrogance, as if he was like 20 years old.
It reminded me of when Caleb Plant was in the ring with Canelo. Like, am I doing good? I'm doing good, right? Like.
Oh yeah.
I think it's what Kell Brook was doing. Like I did go overseas. I did fight over there. I did become a champion, right? Like that's respectable, right?
I think where he loses is he wants validation. It's very much yin and yang. Like Kell Brook, I'm going to be doing a video on this whole thing, but if you look at their rivalry, they're very similar. It's just one got the spotlight, and it was Amir Khan. Kell Brook didn't get that same spotlight. You know, Khan fought in Athens in the Olympics, and Kell Brook had to do it the hard way, fighting on small hall shows. So I think there's a real element of jealousy. I think that's really where the rivalry comes. I think Kell Brook hates to admit it, but he's extremely jealous. You know, and he's a big I'm a Celebrity fan too, which doesn't help.
Clearly, it looked like he's got some very personal things with where Amir Khan. It reminded me of like old school Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard, because Marvin always had a chip on his shoulder about Sugar Ray.
Massive chip on his shoulder.
All the shine. And some would argue Marvin should have got the win in that fight. And Marvin was so disgusted, he just like, I'm leaving boxing. Screw all of you guys. Because he had to work infinitely harder than Sugar Ray did. He ended up becoming an all-time great regardless. But I feel like Kell Brook is just, I couldn't believe he wanted, you can't search for the validation from your opponent.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think he does have a massive chip on his shoulder. And it's like, who is the king of the North? That's really what it all comes down to. And both fighters know that this is all they're going to be remembered for. It doesn't matter what they've done in their career. It doesn't matter that Kell Brook went and beat Sean Porter in America. It doesn't matter that Amir Khan beat Marcus Maidana, beat huge names in America, and beat huge names here. None of it matters anymore. It's like this fight, both show out their primes. This is what determines their career.
It is.
That's it. That's the worst part.
So the verdict is on Kell Brook and Amir Khan. We're both pro Amir Khan in this one.
I'd say I'm pro Amir Khan, but I'm rooting for Kell Brook. I do want to see Kell Brook win. You know, I think it will make his life. Like, do you know what I mean? He'll just retire so happily.
I think Khan wins it. I think it's going to be a late stoppage. I'm calling it Khan late stoppage. If Khan doesn't get straight up knocked out early.
I wish I was going. I'm devastated. But yeah, I might be going to the weigh-in and the media workout. But yeah, all right, we'll wrap up on that one. Is there any other quick topic you want to discuss really quick?
No, I'm good.
Okay, you're good. All right, we'll wrap that up. That was Across the Pond episode. We don't even know at this point. We're going to have to start keeping track.
Yeah, I'll start keeping track of the episodes. I think it might be episode 6 or so or 5, but we'll figure it out. Leo, I'll get this data over to you. And till the next time, Leo, Across the Pond.
Take it easy, guys. All right.